It documents the art collectives and their work that wrenched up the postmodern art world, including Art Workers Coalition, Art and Language, Collab, and Group Material. The book is on sale at the counter. And a little bit about Alan W. Moore. He works with the artist group Collab and helped start the cultural center ABC No Rio. After a stint as a critic, he made video art and installations from the mid-1970s, and in the later 80s went back to art school in art history. He has written on artist groups, cultural districts, and cultural economies. He penned chapters for Alternative Art New York, Collectivism After Modernism, and Resistance, A Political History of the Lower East Side. He is presently running the House Magic Information Project on self-organized occupied social centers in Europe. Please give a warm welcome.
So when I told my friend Michael Carter, the poet, that I was going to do a book event, he said, "Oh, you're doing a reading." Okay, well, so I'm going to start off by reading, which I will read a little bit of this book. Okay, art gangs, protest and counterculture in New York City, the warm-up. Artists work in groups. This is a primary fact of artistic production, although it has not really been accounted for in the telling and teaching about art in recent times. Collective work is an a priori, a reality of creative life. At nearly every moment, artists are working together in one way or another, and under many different arrangements. Without the others, no one can succeed. This basic fact, well known among artists of all eras, was put aside in the buildup of the modern artist hero. This neo-romantic position served to build the market for modernist art during the period of struggle with the Beaux-Arts academies. Moreover, the artists' collective during the early 20th century became indelibly associated with the striving for and realization of political revolution. By mid-century, the Cold War made another ideological reason for the West to exalt the individual and ignore the collective in the world of art. Only after the anti-state revolutions of 1968 was it possible again for the collective to emerge as a vital actor in the world of art. Even in New York City, the center of global capitalism, artists' collectives could begin to play an increasingly important role. Since the fall of the Eastern European socialist states after 1989, the rich history of artistic collectivity has become a source of inspiration to artists today and a subject for study by scholars. A great historical change has begun to change history itself. So anyway, enough reading. I have 3 presentations. Okay, so the story kind of begins at this exhibition called The Machine, as seen at the end of the Mechanical Age, which was produced by Pontus Hultén, the sainted Swedish curator, in 1968, Museum of Modern Art. And some of you may have seen this catalog. It's bound in metal. It's kind of a classic of Museum of Modern Art catalog design. Now, in the exhibition was an artist named Takis, who was a Greek artist who was working with technology. And Takis was a refugee from the generals who had come to power in Greece through a military coup. And so he was a very politicized guy. And he made a deal with the curator, Pontus Hultén, that, you know, what would be exhibited in the show. And in the last moment, when they're hanging the show, Pontus Hultén's like, why don't you put this one out? Yeah. So Takis became annoyed, and he said, no, you can't exhibit my work without my permission. And he went into the Museum of Modern Art with a bunch of his buddies, and he removed the work from exhibition. I don't know, did he cut the cord? He just took it out, and he walked out into the garden with the thing, and the museum people started freaking out, and they brought a curator, and it became a big deal. And here we see some of his friends, art critics, Jean Courant, Willoughby Sharp, Liza Bear is next to her, the publishers. Liza's not here, but she's around. Willoughby died a couple years ago. Okay, so then they went into the garden, and they had a discussion. And Takis and his friends were not satisfied with the outcome of the discussion. So they started to organize more discussions in the museum, and at one point, a few days later, there was a big demonstration in the sculpture garden. And the whole thing began to acquire a sort of a momentum of its own. And they started an organization to address the grievances of artists against the museums and the whole system of art in general. And they called their emerging formation the Art Workers Coalition. Yeah. Okay. So this I show you this image, which was reprinted by a group called Primary Information, and you can buy it, I think, for $3 at the Print and Matter store. And it's someone resting during one of the demonstrations. And art workers won't kiss the asses of the museums in order to get ahead, and so that they will come out from their subservient positions, sitting, waiting patiently for a visit from a curator, and organize themselves to demand their rights. Okay, this is post 68, kind of, I don't know, almost naive organization, but hundreds of artists and art workers, which is a term that expands the category to critics, curators, everyone else who's involved in the business of art, kind of organize themselves collectively, continuous open meetings, rancorous discussions, and they really captured the attention of the institutional art world. The New York Times covered their activities scrupulously and continuously, which never hurts. And one of the things that I discovered in my research was that the Art Workers Coalition, as it came into being, was continuously supported by the East Village Other, which was an underground newspaper. Now these things don't exist. There's a new book, probably you guys have it, called Flaming Typewriters by John Macmillan, and he outlines the kind of story of the underground press. It's been told many times, but this is a new book. And one of the chapters I didn't finish was the FBI campaign to destroy the underground press. Was initiated by J. Edgar Hoover himself. And anyhow, so these guys no longer exist. Leonard here, who ran the East Village Eye, had his stats shot by the guy who shot the stats for the East Village Other, Lanny Kenfield. So there's some continuations. Okay, and so the East Village Others closely supported the emergence of the Art Workers Coalition, published their earliest lists of demands. I should mention, and this, in the same way that I wasn't able to include the feminist groups in this story to the extent that they deserve, I was also not able to include the groups of artists of color, which were continuous, started before '68. Umbra and others. And at this point, there was a sense in the left that the African Americans were leading because they were facing the most oppression, and you needed to follow their lead in terms of building for a revolution. So I throw this page from the East Village Other in there to signify that. Okay, so the Art Workers Coalition was meeting at a place called the Museum, a project for living artists. This is a poster of museum. This was a large alternative space before there were alternative spaces, a big loft on Broadway. You only have your post office box here, where there were exhibitions organized, various cultural functions. Hippies would crash. That got out of hand. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly when they opened, but they didn't last a long time. Art Workers Coalition starts January 1969. The museum was up and running, so they probably opened in '68. But they pretty much closed like 70, 71. Not exactly sure. Okay, this is the space, which, for aficionados of Soho looks familiar. During an Art Workers Coalition meeting, photographed by Jan Van Ray. You see her, no you don't. It can't be her taking the picture in the mirror. Anyway, yeah, but it was a big space, very luxurious really for artists. New York being kind of in a depression at the time. And we would imagine the Broadway Central complex of performance spaces, like more or less across the street or down the block or something. It's kind of a corridor that's pre-Soho. Okay, and at the museum, they also had an exhibition called the ARM Show, the Aims of the Revolutionary Media. And this is the show, and it sort of has like a very DIY, low-rent Rodchenko kind of, display of newspapers, and Third World Newsreel exhibited their films. So the alternative press was very closely tied in with the Art Workers Coalition at the very beginning. So we're talking about kind of formations that at this point in time don't exist or exist in a completely different form. So the museum took the Art Workers Coalition very seriously. It included a number of already famous artists. And at one point, the director, the first guy, I'm blanking on his name, he blew it. He really took a ham-handed, heavy-handed approach to dealing with the coalition. So they dropped him, they fired him, and they hired this guy, John Hightower. And Hightower actually came down to the museum and talked to the Art Workers Coalition, the director of the Museum of Modern Art, and tried to work things out. He didn't last long either. Okay, but the museum said, okay, we'll work with you, and they began to produce. The Art Workers Coalition said, we want to produce a poster against the Vietnam War. So they produced this poster using Ron Haberle's horrific photograph of the massacre at My Lai, and a portion of the transcript from the interview with one of Lieutenant Calley's soldiers. And at the last minute, the Board of Trustees caught wind of this and said,